We've all seen the headlines about Jeffrey Epstein. He was a paedophile who used money and access to run a human trafficking operation. That story always gets told as if it began and ended with one man. It did not. To understand how people like Epstein gain that kind of reach and protection, we need to look at how a group of predators is using wealth and influence as cover for their perversion and corruption. That world wasn't Epstein's. He was a mere node inside of it. And to truly understand the full picture of Epstein, we need to go back to Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was an Orthodox Jew born in Solotvino, Ukraine in 1923. When the region fell under Nazi occupation, Jewish people were forced into violent sorting systems. The working class socialist Jews were murdered and deported to the gas chambers. But if you had a bit of money, then the British Empire could use you. They needed bodies to go to the Middle East. They needed settlers to protect oil infrastructure and trade routes. Palestine was already under British mandate, and that mandate was an imperial garrison. The war in Eastern Europe is what fed manpower into British units and auxiliaries. The Jewish migration flows were curated, strategic. People were channeled into the places where the British Empire needed labourers and soldiers. The Notram, or the Jewish Settlement Police, worked with British officers to defend the pipeline and strike insurgent cells in the Arab Revolt. The British state and this European exile structure actively recruited multilingual Jewish refugees for war work. They had channels running from the Balkans into the Levant, and they had screening and placement hubs in Beirut and Haifa. From there, these recruits were routed into the Pioneer Corps or other units, and then shipped to Britain for training. These were organised corridors. The mainstream media telling of the life of Robert Maxwell says poetically that he walked. No, Robert Maxwell did not walk himself to British mandated Palestine. That is categorically false. Maxwell was exactly the kind of recruit that Britain needed. He had the languages, he had a high risk tolerance, and he had proven himself an extremely effective communicator. The British authorities like Maxwell, and so after the war they place him inside the British Control Commission for Germany. His role in public relations and information services control gave Maxwell the power to decide what could be published or read inside the British-controlled part of Germany. He would personally vet the editors, license printers, and watch for any political risk. In other words, he had total information control. By 1947, Maxwell ran a whole publisher in Germany for the British. This trained him in leadership for the British Empire's information war against the working class. Maxwell learned how to control licenses, paper rations, and export permits. He learned how the state uses publishing as its main weapon. He learned how the media is used to steer public knowledge, launder influence, and surveil enemies and allies alike. He also learned how to build covert finance inside of routine paperwork. How you turn contracts and rights and distribution fees into your own personal leverage. In 1949, Maxwell moves into a British science research publisher. This was no ordinary science book publisher. It was called Butterworth Springer. Butterworth Springer produced technical and scientific research papers. Their customers are governments, military departments, researchers, universities, corporations, those who work on energy, weapons, industrial design. After 1945, German and Austrian scientific research could not be published or exported freely. The British, the Americans, and the French kept control of who could publish this kind of material. Running Butterworth Springer put Maxwell at the intersection of money, science, and government. He decided what research and titles got translated from German to English. He was a gatekeeper node between German research scientists and Western commercial entities. He was deeply and closely connected to Whitehall and city bankers. In 1951, he bought the publication outright and renamed it to Pergamon Press. And the money that he raised to buy this publication came from his wartime intelligence finance networks, including Sir Charles Hambro, one of the City of London's biggest war bankers. They backed him because Pergamon gave them reach into a strategic sector, control over the circulation of scientific data. Pergamon sat on the front line of the Cold War information market. Maxwell controlled and sold the scientific journals that moved through British universities, weapons laboratories, and government research agencies. Pergamon gave London and its partners a platform inside the scientific research market. And it gave Maxwell a personal machine to turn state access into his own cash and influence. Pergamon's catalogues carried journals in physics, chemistry, metallurgy, nuclear studies, medicine, engineering, all materials that Western governments wanted for weapons, energy, and industry. Maxwell used Pergamon to dominate contracts for the translation and distribution of Eastern European and Soviet research, selling their research into Western ministries, laboratories, and defense contractors. He was the gatekeeper of the knowledge that enabled the Western commercial pipelines. For his friends, he delivered both cash and leverage. For everybody else, he delivered propaganda. It's out of Pergamon that Maxwell built his network of subsidiaries and shell companies. And he moved publishing rights and royalties between London, Liechtenstein, and the Channel Islands. Maxwell negotiated directly with government agencies, universities, and intelligence agencies. He understood that publishing is not just culture. It is power's most important weapon, what you know. And he found a way to extract rent from the flow of research and position himself as indispensable to any official who wanted fast access to foreign science. Pergamon's company ledgers and catalogues map where the empire's money, technology, and security interests ran for a very long time. The British state leveraged Pergamon as a trusted operator shaping narrative flows around the Cold War. This company gave him reach inside Eastern laboratories and Western governments at the same time. Through the 60s and 70s, he kept expanding. He bought the Daily Mirror, the scandal he's most known for. He cultivated ties with London, Washington, Moscow, and Tel Aviv. And in 1988, he made his boldest move. He spent $2.5 billion on buying Macmillan Inc. Macmillan produced school books used by millions of American children. These books shaped how generations of children understood their history, their government, science, the economy. This one purchase put Maxwell overnight in control of the entire narrative ecosystem. Most people hear fragments about Jeffrey Epstein, the financier who moved money for billionaires, scientists, the MIT research lab. But the media likes you to focus only on Epstein, as if he worked alone, because they don't want you to talk about how deep these networks actually go.